had his hottest friend pleasure me when he was out of town, but he saw clues. Then he ended me. Hello, everyone. I wish I could say that I made a huge mistake, but I'm not sure I can collectively call all what I did a mistake. It went on for a long time, and it wasn't just a single affair, but the consequences I was hit with came so fast. I can't fully explain how in the blink of an eye, my whole world turned upside down, and everyone somehow turned against me. Apparently, I'm now the bad guy. But I thought I could end it all before my husband found out, but I wasn't ready when he did. He read all the signs before I could realize. And now, he doesn't want me anymore, doesn't need me anymore. Not that he ever really did. My husband and I got married about a decade ago after meeting at a book club. I'll spare you the details because I plan to make this read as short as possible, but it was an online thing. We both clicked there and started talking through private chats, and we got to know that we had so much in common. We were both young and ambitious, and just had this drive. I was 2 years older than him, but that didn't matter to any of us. We got married in less than a year, and the focus was to help each other achieve our dreams. So we didn't want any distractions, including kids, but as you may have guessed, that was inevitable. I personally hated using protection, and besides, we were married, so I brought up the idea that we could just schedule our sex in consideration of my safety periods. But a few other times when we were just so exhausted from a busy week, we ignored the rule and had sex anyway. I usually took an after pill, but I guess that didn't stop our darling daughter from being conceived. Also, in the early years of our marriage, my husband had begun to get a little fat. I don't know if it came as a result of having a wife, or if it was just his destiny to have it, but I didn't like it. I kept nagging and telling him to do something about it, but every time he'd say he never had the time because he was too preoccupied with work. Unfortunately, when I got pregnant, I became worse than him. My legs had swollen, as had my face and every other part of my body, and my emotions were on the rise. I was much more aggressive to my husband because I blamed him for putting the baby in me and letting me go through all that pain alone. I started saying he wanted me to become as plump as he was, and that's why he put me through the whole baby situation. But he was ever so patient. It was definitely a trying time for him, but he had always been a patient man, and I had always been the aggressive one. I guess that's why we made the perfect match. Months passed by, and I finally had my child. But to me, it was a long wait, and it got me so frustrated because not only did I lose my shape and all, but I had to leave work. I took a leave for what? Almost a year? Say 6 to 7 months. I was so scared that I was lacking behind and losing promotion opportunities. So after I gave birth, I told my husband I had already risked my career by keeping the baby and carrying her for all those months, and I couldn't do it again. He wanted me to at least stay till she was almost a year old, but I refused. I told him we'd have to get a nanny, but he refused and stood his ground no matter what I said. He said he wouldn't let another person raise his child. That's when I told him that that wasn't my problem, that if he wanted her to be raised by a biological parent so much, he could do it himself, and that I didn't care how he planned on doing that. With that, I went back to work, but my husband made himself available during that period. He really loved our daughter more than I ever could. He didn't want her to just grow up under the wings of some strange woman. But I was too busy thinking of all I had missed and lost during the time I carried her in my womb. I wasn't happy with myself. I had lost my shape, my form. I felt I was too fat, even though he tried to convince me otherwise. People could actually tell that I had given birth, and I didn't like that. I then decided I was going to work out, and that may just have been the worst decision I ever made in my life, because as harmless as it may sound, that decision ruined everything I had worked so hard. My marriage, the little relationship I was beginning to have with my daughter, even my career. But it didn't directly have an effect. The entire workout thing was a success. In a short time, I became fit again. Maybe too fit. I felt very, very confident, too confident. So much so that I started looking down on my husband. I felt I was too pretty and fit for him, because even though I was older, he looked like the older one, probably because he was such a workaholic. And when our baby came along and I said I couldn't stay home with her, he dedicated himself to become a full-time house husband. I, on the other hand, started looking outside my marriage. But in my defense, apart from my feeling too good for him, he had started paying less and less attention to me. He obviously loved that little girl more than he did me. Sometimes I even got jealous because it was too much. He spent every spare time he had with her. A man who had adored me for over 4 years suddenly wouldn't even spare me a glance. But as I said, I felt I was way better than him, and I convinced myself he wasn't even that good looking anymore, so I would find myself men who were more worthy of my looks. I registered for a dating app. I wanted to start little. I wasn't ready to cause any major scandal, and I was considering my daughter somehow. I chatted nastily with strange men online. At first it was just flirtatious texts and stuff, but then it graduated to sending each other nudes. And before I knew it, I was on late-night video calls with different men every night. My husband had moved out of our room the moment I refused to take care of our child. And for almost 2 years, he didn't touch me. My daughter didn't know me well enough because I never spent time with her unless she needed something. We were living in the house like strangers. And I felt it was just him giving me the liberty to do whatever I wanted, so I did just that. I started meeting up with some of these men. I had gotten so used to that sluttish life that it began to even affect my career. I was losing focus at work because I was always on my phone. My superiors were taking notice too. So I decided I had had enough. I convinced the narcissistic part of me that even if my husband wasn't as sharp as he used to be, he was still the man I married and the father of my child. I apologized to him and told him I was tired of living that kind of life, that I wanted us to go back to what we used to be. Surprisingly, he was happy to take me back. He said it took me long enough to come back to my senses. We started bonding, the 3 of us, but I could never have the kind of connection he had with our little girl. We were getting closer, but she always preferred her daddy to me. In any situation, she picked him. It frustrated me, and that's not all. Sex with him didn't feel like it used to either. I kept thinking of other men while he did his thing. I could literally feel nothing, and it suffocated me. I know now it was my fault. I stained our relationship the moment I opened that dating app, and nothing could ever be the same, no matter how hard I tried, so I just stopped trying. I went back to acting like a whore. As time went by, my body count only increased. I even gave in to my boss at the office who had been into me for a while, but that helped at first. I got some privileges, and I started lagging behind. I didn't work as hard anymore, and as for my husband, I just gave him what he wanted when I got back to avoid any suspicions. He was never dim-witted, so I suspect he must have known something was off. But I also feel like he was scared of finding out the truth, so he probably just kept making up excuses for my behavior. But once again, things started to fall apart. The only thing that didn't at the time was my relationship with my daughter. My husband tried his best to make that solid no matter what. Maybe not for me, but for her. He must have told himself that the girl needed her mother no matter what. By the time our baby had turned 6, my husband had already reinvested himself in his work, and his schedule became pretty tight again. So we hired a nanny to take care of her, and on her 8th birthday, her father threw her the biggest party there could ever be. He invited lots and lots of people, including some business associates of his and friends I hadn't seen in a long time. And that's when I met Corey. I had never noticed him before, and judging from the way he acted, I reckon he was a new acquaintance of my husband. More of a business partner than a friend, I'd say, because they became friends through business. He was the only friend my husband had that wasn't married. He was very, very good looking. I'm talking jet black hair, square face, definite abs, and a smile one could die for. And he was a gentle man. Before my husband introduced us, we'd already met, and I believed there was strong chemistry between us. For a moment I thought I may have chosen my life partner too fast, because I could see it in Corey's eyes that he felt the same thing I was feeling when our eyes met. But when my husband introduced me as his wife, it almost ruined the whole thing. I could see the sudden disappointment he felt. But I told myself I wasn't going to let marriage ruin an opportunity of adventure for me. Plus, I had considered my husband to be a nobody anyway, so I wasn't exactly afraid of him, and I never thought he'd think of divorcing me since we already had a child together. I thought my daughter would seal the deal for me, but not even she could save me. If anything, she may have added to my ruin. Corey didn't stay long at the party after our introduction, but I watched him all the while, and as he was about to leave, I rushed and asked him for his number. I told him I'd like to invite him home to dinner someday. The next week, my husband went on a business trip, and I invited Corey over. I bribed our daughter, Anne, with some chocolate and ice cream to stay in her room while we ate. So it was just the two of us. There was tension, and I planned on making it rise even more. I put food in my mouth a certain way, made sure I brought my tongue out and licked my lips every once in a while, and I wouldn't stop playing with my hair. I could see Corey was really trying to hold it in, and when he couldn't any longer, he got up to say he was leaving. I insisted on walking him to the door, but I walked in front of him, and when we got to the door, instead of turning the knob, I turned and took him in a kiss. At first he was trying to resist, but eventually he gave up, and we went up and had sex in my bedroom. The next morning, I woke up to Anne screaming at my bedroom door. She knew her father had traveled, so I guess she was just shocked to still see two people in our bed. Corey quickly dressed up and left the house. I had to look for a sensible lie to tell my daughter as to why another man was butt naked in her father's bedroom. Corey texted me later that night, said he had a wonderful time. I couldn't bring myself to stop blushing. He also said he wanted to start afresh with Anne. So we agreed to get ice cream the next day, but Anne still didn't like him. She may be a child, but she's as quick-witted as her father. And she was 8 already. I should have known that she didn't by the excuse I gave her the other day. Corey was disappointed at the outcome of the ice cream date, because Anne was on her iPad all the while and barely said a word. Even when he asked her a question, she would just side-eye him and mumble, then ask me when we could go home. I couldn't control her. She never listened to me. After the supposed ice cream date, Corey dropped us off at home. Anne couldn't even wait for the engine to be turned off before she ran into the house. I invited Corey in for a drink, and he agreed to it. But it wasn't just the drink we had that night. We had sex again, and it was wonderful. In fact, he experimented with my body. He did things to me that I never imagined, and besides the sex, there was something about Corey I simply couldn't resist. He had me locked in. That whole week, I didn't dare even look at another man. I just wanted him, and only him. I knew the time we had was short, and already I liked everything about him. From his scent to his breathing, and even the way he walked, every little thing about him just pulled me in. So I dedicated that entire week to him, and my matrimonial bed became the permanent venue for our activities. At some point, I stopped minding whether Anne was in the house with me or not, because during that time, Corey was giving me the best time I'd had in a very long time. But time passed by so quickly, and my husband was due back. That meant our little affair had to stop. I couldn't be sleeping with someone so connected to him. I just couldn't afford my husband finding out. But little did I know, though, that his return would be the end of everything. Not just the end of Corey, but the end of my marriage and the beginning of my downfall. The day my husband came back unannounced, it was obvious the only person he was happy to see was our daughter. They spent the whole day together, locked up in her room. He didn't even eat the food I prepared, and sleeping in our bedroom was a no-no. I thought we had settled our differences since the last time and agreed that no matter what, packing out was not an option, but he did contrary to our agreement. He did go into the bedroom as soon as he arrived. Luckily, Corey had left earlier, but I didn't have enough time to fix the whole room up. But I still didn't understand how and why he just appeared like that. I suspected he'd been watching me somehow, or someone had snitched, but I knew it couldn't be Corey. He wouldn't gain anything from it. The room still smelled of him. I couldn't even deny it and say I got a new perfume or something, because it was obviously a masculine perfume, and I didn't even have a bottle to show as proof that it was mine. So when he asked why the room smelt so, I told him I couldn't smell anything. He walked around the room, and I walked directly behind him, trying to push aside anything that may have implicated me. But then he went to the bedside and saw 2 wine glasses. He didn't ask me who the other one belonged to. Instead, he straight up asked me if I brought a man into the house. I was baffled. I didn't understand why he'd suddenly ask me such a thing, but I denied it with every fiber in my body. I started saying he didn't trust me anymore after all these years, but none of my guilt-tripping was going to work. My husband simply went to a corner of the room and picked up something I never noticed was there. Then he left. I spent the rest of the evening wondering what made him suspect me like that, and what he could have picked up from the room. I didn't have the slightest idea. I hadn't had that room cleaned in days. In fact, since he left. Because of the time I was spending with Corey that week, I told the cleaner not to bother coming into my room. I slept that night and assured myself that everything would work out fine, and the husband I knew was a man of action. If he did indeed take something from the room that could find me guilty even the slightest bit, he'd have said something that night. But I was wrong. Now I think he didn't react that night because Anne was asleep and he didn't want to disturb her. The next morning, however, he didn't drive her to school himself. He let his driver take her. And before he left for work, he came into the bedroom and saw me preparing to leave too. He simply told me that by the time he was back from work, he didn't want to find me in his house. I was utterly confused. I yelled at him and told him he was being abusive if he attempted to chase me out of my marital home. But he reminded me that the house I referred to as my marital home was one he built with his hard-earned money, and not in my wildest dreams could the house have been in my name. Secondly, that if it was really my matrimonial home, I would have no business fucking a man in our bed. For some reason, I felt insulted that he spoke to me like that, used such words on me. I rose my hand to slap him. It wouldn't have been the first time. I always did it when I was angry with him, or when he just frustrated me. But he held my hand and said that would be the last time I'd get the opportunity to raise a hand at him. Right there and then, he sent the video of all the sexual activities Corey and I engaged in the previous night to everyone he felt should know. That included friends at my workplace, family members, and other mutual friends. He didn't want anyone coming to ask him any questions on why he kicked me out. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. Calls, texts, everyone was asking me if it was true. I didn't reply to any of them nor take their calls. I was trying to put everything together in my head. Then he told me how disappointed he was that I didn't even have the decency to take it to a hotel, that I was a bad influence on our daughter, and so he was not just filing for divorce, but custody of Anne. To be sincere, Anne was the last thing I could think of at that moment. We never had a strong relationship to begin with. But in a split second, my husband crushed my world. How to go back to work, I wasn't sure. How to face my family, I had absolutely no idea. I had younger siblings looking up to me, you know. But now they probably all think I'm trash. To make matters worse, when I finally gathered the courage to go to work 2 days later, thinking the rumors wouldn't matter, they actually did. My married boss was worried that since my secret started spilling, our affair would come into limelight as well, and that his wife was already asking questions. That wasn't even the main problem. My husband found Corey to be unworthy of his acquaintance, including his business, so he cut him and his organization off. He had built his career so diligently that he was now connected to a lot of firms in town, including the place I worked. My boss was scared that if my husband found out about our little affair somehow, he would stop giving them whatever benefits they were receiving before. So I got laid off. As it is right now, I've been relying on my savings to pay for the hotel room I stay in and the food I eat. I've been applying for jobs, but it's almost as if they keep turning me down, particularly. My daughter doesn't miss me one bit. I see my husband post her every day and her big smile never fades. If anything, she seems way happier with me out of the picture. I might have to reply to those texts eventually and answer my mom's call, because I'm just not sure how long my savings will last me or how long I can keep avoiding everyone for.